Hello. I just want to make a video about the discussions I had for the last couple of days with people, and they're usually Christians, and I see it right away by the way they argue because of the speciesist arguments that they come up with, which aren't very valid arguments to begin with, because the arguments are coming from a mindset of complete misconception about biological life on Earth. So there's a couple of misconceptions that I encounter on a regular basis on the internet, and I would like to discuss those in the video. That's the best I can do for the world. I don't have a TV show. I don't have I'm not a stripper. I'm not a dancer. I'm not a star. I'm not an actor. I'm not a famous writer. I wish. So YouTube, baby, that's all I have. And as an activist, I will take advantage of this option, even if only one person watches my video. That's better than nothing, and even if nobody watches, again, at least I tried. So, but I have been talking to people quite a bit for the last couple of years, back and forth, sometimes really long letters, sometimes like comment exchanges, and I have met amazing people, and I have met people who are very uninformed as well, and that seems to be the rule, because and it's not against them personally that they're not informed, and that's why I'm making this video, to help to get them informed, because obviously what is taught in the schools is absolutely pitiful. It doesn't anything resemble anywhere near, anywhere in the periphery, what life on Earth is actually all about. So there's all these misconceptions, and I see that even in public schools they teach creationism that is against the law in Europe, for example. You know, that would be inconceivable for any kind of school, particularly a public school, to teach creationism. I mean, that would set Europe back in time. It would set their economy back, because people aren't able to cope with the demands of knowledge with the rest of the world. And I always like to bring up the example of the Mercedes-Benz daughter facility that they had in the United States for a while, and they brought electricians and engineers with them from Germany that are employees of Mercedes-Benz, and they got electricians and engineers from the United States to work there as well. So the whole thing did not work out, and the reason why it didn't work out, I think they had to close it up and move it back to Europe, because they said because of cultural differences. So, and I know what the cultural differences are. This is probably the scenario that plays itself out. The regular electrician, technician, worker or engineer from Germany comes here to this country, you know, they make friends with another electrician. Oh, hey, let's meet. Yeah, it's fun. That's cool. You work here, and we're all buddies. We're great together. Let's have a dinner together. So maybe the German invites the U.S. worker, or the U.S. worker invites the German. Let's say the German invites the U.S. worker and says, "Come on over for wine and dinner." So they are cooking. Let's say they cook something vegetarian and they have a wine. That's probably most people in Germany, I think, drink red wine for dinner. I don't. I'm against alcohol. But that's what the people there usually do, and they don't drink too much. They just drink one glass or two with a gourmet dinner, and they eat dinner late, like around 9 p.m. So they have these people come over, and first of all, it will already clash with the fact that these people, they will bring over steaks for the barbecue. Where's the barbecue? No barbecue here? You don't cook steaks? Here, I got a six-pack of beer. Well, we drink wine. Okay, here's the bags of potato chips. We don't eat potato chips. Okay, this is already where the first clash starts. But that's all fine. That's okay. That can be worked out. Okay, so they eat dinner together. So the conversation goes all over the place, talk about, oh, it's a nice country, beautiful environment, and so many trees still, and we in Germany, we don't have that many trees anymore. So I'm just guessing that this is how the conversation goes. So the U.S. electrician will be kind of perturbed by this already. So, and this is, I know this from my own conversations with people. When I first came to the U.S., I was quite shocked about the anti-environmentalism. So, I would say, oh, so much forested area, it's great, so much nature still, and they will say, well, that should be logged or something, or that's only for tree huggers, or they will say that's good for hunting. And so as soon as they say that, the average German will say, well, wait a minute, you hunt animals? That's terrible. How can you do this? And so this is where the first conflict begins to unzip itself, like a zipper of a jacket. So the U.S. citizens will say, you don't hunt? Well, you must be a pussy. Are you gay? German will say, no. You see, this is my wife. We're married, or the wife will say, this is my husband. You see, we're married and we love animals, and we would never go hunting, would never hurt an animal. My dad, for example, said he had a couple who were hunting, and otherwise quite nice people, but they hunted. I just can't understand it. So my dad told them that he could never, ever, ever, ever shoot an animal. Never. And they just looked at him and accepted that. But then in this conversation between a U.S. citizen and a German citizen, it would play out differently. The U.S. citizen would then start to take offense at some point when the German will say, "I could never hurt an animal." That's where the ego begins to be hurt, because when the German says, "I could never hunt an animal," the moment he says that, he is stepping on the ego of the U.S. person, and without meaning to. And so this is when when the ego is hurt, then the U.S. guy will say, we are the apex predator or something. I've heard this, I can't count it anymore how many times I've heard this shitty argument that is no argument. And so yeah, and then you will see the conversation will play itself out, and then guaranteed, eventually, sooner or later, the subject Christianity will come up, and they will justify it with the Bible, Matthew or whatever, you know. So, or John, or whatever these names are. So, yeah. So that then they will come up with their Bible quotes, and I've seen it all. I've seen it in personal conversations with people, in person, out there in at the beach. I have seen it on the internet a million times. I've seen it between other people. I've seen it in my own conversations with people. Just by thinking differently, the caring, educated people will be stepping on the other person's ego, and that's when the problem begins to really unfold, because once the ego is hurt, then they will become aggressive in some way or another. The Christian might suppress the anger when they are sitting with somebody on the table, versus when they're on the internet, they will let the anger go real quickly, and they won't hold back in what they say and how nasty it is what they say. But when they sit with them on the table, it will take a little longer until the ego gets worked up good enough. And so yeah, once the ego is worked up to the fullest, then the first insults come flying, and that's when the German will say, okay, I guess we should close it up for tonight. Bye bye, thank you for coming over. And he will never invite them again. Okay, this is the first rift there among the workers, the employees, the Germans and the US people. And so then they won't get along very well either at work. Then they will not cooperate. The US, and it's probably the US people that still are sitting on this anger issue, the ego that is not going to ever get resolved, because they're not resolving their problems. They already have this unempowerment, which is a huge thing in the US. People are unempowered psychologically, and the Christian religion is a main vehicle to keep people unempowered and to unempower them. So that's the very thing that made people unempowered. But that's the very thing that makes people get really bruised and hurt in their ego when they see someone else even remotely criticizing this kind of worldview. And just by saying I care, this already seems to be a huge criticism towards their mindset and view. And so yeah, so then they don't work well together at the facility, and they don't cooperate. The US people will not cooperate well. They will try to sabotage it. They will try to make the German look like he made something wrong, he did something wrong. They will plant mistakes into them. I've experienced it even myself, but that was a long time ago in Germany. So that had to do with me being different among these workers. I just worked for a month in some factory. I just wanted to see how people are treated there and what they're doing. And I saw, and I didn't reveal anything about me, who I am, what my degrees are, or anything. And just the way I was dressed, I guess, or the way I didn't have makeup on or long fingernails. That alone was making these other people really mad at me, and they planted evidence into me making a mistake. And so that got me fired, but I would have quit already myself, because I was about to quit myself because I couldn't take it. It got me nightmares, that whole atmosphere there. And it's kind of like, and I don't even blame the people who planted the evidence against me, because I see what's happening. They're so totally unempowered, and when they see somebody who's different, just being different is already like a threat to their ego. And so can you imagine if it happens there, even between the worker class and the intellectuals, when there's absolutely no more communication happening other than work related. When the German engineers meet the US engineers, there is an even wider rift between them because of this difference in worldview. Because the Germans are taught evolution in school and science, and that's why they're doing very well on the world market. That's why they have a very well working economy, even though they have paid from their funds into Greece and Spain and Italy, because these three countries weren't doing very well. They had too much corruption, and Germany kept paying into it to balance it out so they wouldn't lose the European Union. And even with this, and we all predicted that the European Union is going to fall because of this, even with this it didn't fall. Even with this, Germany is doing very well economically, and the European Union also. So that says something. So if you have to be educated, if you want to be competitive on the world market, there are about 3 major misconceptions and many more. But I'm just gonna discuss these 3 major misconceptions that the Christians in the United States have. This is where the anti-information is spread the widest. So misconception number 1 is that they think the human is the apex predator, is the human has the right therefore to exploit the other animals. Okay, major misconception, because there are other, not only do the other living beings have a total right to live and exist, but there are other living beings other than human who are more advanced, who are smarter than humans, who are even more of an apex predator, if you want to use that terminology. The orca whale, for example, or the humpback whale. I think that it was the humpback whale that was declared the smartest animal on planet Earth. Smarter than people. Their brain 6 times as large as the human brain, way more convoluted, the gray matter, way more sulky and geary in the brain, and they have the spindle cell. They have a lot of the spindle cells, which are standing for highly cognitive, abstract thinking ability. They have more of that than humans have. They have a way more elaborate language that has been also studied by system analytics, who have compared their language. Even though they don't understand it, they see how complex it is, and they compared the complexity of their language, the echolocation language, to the human language, and they saw that the echolocation language is way more complex. No comparison. So that's why it would be so fascinating to create a common language so we can actually exchange information with them and find out how they think. Their way of living is so completely different to ours because it is happening in water. This is completely different living than on land. And they live most of the time under the surface of the ocean. They come up to the surface to breathe. They come up to breathe every hour or something like this. And I think some can stay longer. And this is a completely different lifestyle. You can't build weapons in the ocean. You can't make things like this that explode. You can't even make weapons. You can't even make bow and arrow, and even if you could, you wouldn't grow arms, because arms would not be beneficial to be swimming high speed. So whatever evolves in the ocean will not have arms. It will, what once used to be legs will atrophy and completely retract back, and in some whales completely inside. But when you do an X-ray, you will see inside of the whale, on the side of the body, you will still see 5 fingers of bones inside, but kind of atrophied, short, and all of this. A rudiment when the bone structure for this is still visible, but it will be called an atavism if this bone structure of the hand will all of a sudden show itself outside again after it had already disappeared. So these things, we can see how they have evolved. They have evolved from a land animal, from a prehistoric type of wolf, not the wolf, but a forefather of the wolf. So the wolves and the dogs and the whales, they have common ancestors. Of course, we all have common ancestors, but they have clearly branched off into different directions. The wolf branched off towards the wolf on land, and the whale branched off towards the animal that got a thicker and thicker tail, longer and longer, kind of like those brontosaurus. That tail was important to move them forward in the water. They became more and more aquatic. They were hunting in the ocean, and maybe some of them became a prey animal, because it's hard to trace this all back, but they are trying to find more and more fossils to be able to find the different species that have evolved from this land wolf, land whale. And so same applies to humans, and if anybody wants to ignore this, they're not going to be at all even a match for the rest of the world that that requires this knowledge. If you are a creationist, you don't have any knowledge about evolution, you will not make it on the world market. A company that is Christian will not make it, will not be competitive on the world market. So people have to take this into account. So yeah, that back to the other argument. There are animals more evolved than we are. They just evolved parallel to humans in a different body, because it needed a different body for the survival of the situation, for the survival in the ocean. And humans evolved this way because this happened to be beneficial for them in dealing with the predatory animals on land. So they evolved to make tools with their hands, and the hands got more and more into the shape where it can be used like this. A monkey's thumb is way lower, and I don't think it reaches with the forefinger or the other fingers like this. And this is what's critical to make tools and to make computers and make machinery, and also the brain that understands the logistics of all of this, and to put something like this together. But again, there were only a few of those brains who came up with these logistics. The other people are just following into it and replicating. So it's like whenever somebody says we are so intelligent, no. There's a tiny minority of people who are very intelligent, and the rest is just following into it and copying it and making use of that information. They're learning from them. Okay, that doesn't mean that they're not good or anything. It just means that they are not as intelligent. So anybody who says we're all the same under the Christian God, okay, well they will say God. Okay, they won't say Christian God because they think that their Christian God is the only God. But there are 5,000 or 6,000 gods that people have created. That's why I say the Christian God, just like I say U.S. America and not America, because America is also South America and it's also North America, and North America consists of Mexico, U.S. and Canada. And people seem to forget that when they say America, referring to the United States. So I think this is also very critical. It's very critical how we word ourselves, because with the way we word ourselves, we teach other people. And if we keep the same wording and all of this, like some people, they have a vocabulary that comes straight from the Bible, that's like 300 years old. If we use the same terminology, and some of the terminology is so outdated and so refuted by science that it cannot even possibly be used anymore. But if they continue to use it, like in these enclaves of their Christian societies or their different cults that they have, then there's no wonder they will be stagnating in this type of mindset if they constantly reaffirm that same old language. And there is so much in our language that we use. There's speciesism in the language, there is sexism in the language, there is racism in the language. There's a lot of those misconceptions in the language, a lot of ignorance, and we need to work that out. We need to dissolve this. This is absolutely critical, The second misconception that these people bring up is that that they will accuse the other land animals. I mean, they don't know anything about the whales, about the ocean animals, so they don't even talk about those. They know nothing about. They don't know that they're more intelligent beings in the ocean. So they will always refer to the land animals. And what's funny is, instead of referring to the dog, who is the companion, our most loyal companion, then no, they will skip right over to the starfish or the sea cucumber, or they will talk about a rat. So I have to bring him right back to the dog. Don't talk about the starfish. Don't even talk about the real small mammals. Talk about the mammal that's right there with us, that's living right next to us, our distant cousin, the dog. So some of the small animals are quite intelligent, even the little mice and all of they're quite intelligent, but of course not near as intelligent and evolved as the dog is. So look at the dog. Don't bring up those other ones as your argument, okay? Look at the dog. How evolved the dog is. The dog is in some levels way more evolved than we are. Their way of smelling, their sense of smelling. Why do you think they use dogs, particularly Labradors and German Shepherds, and also pigs? Why do you think they use those to sniff bombs and drugs and such things? Because they work better than machines. They are so amazing with the way they can detect traces of smells that would totally elude a human. We can never trace this back, ever. We would smell nothing where they smell the most intricate things. They live in a world of smell. Almost. It's almost like a 3D world of smell, like the ocean animals live in a world of sound, a 3D world of sound. So the dogs and the pigs and maybe there's some other animals that have really, really highly evolved, bears for example, have highly evolved sense of smell. and I think opossums too, and raccoons. So they can trace smells from way back, like from miles back almost. So and when they then there's a trace of smell on the ground, and even after it has weathered away, for us there'll be no way we could detect it, not even with the machine. They can still smell these footprints from the other animal and trace it all the way back to their dens. So they have evolved that way to survive, of course. You know, we have not needed that. We humans have the Neanderthals, or the ones from Africa, the Cro-Magnons. They evolved to make tools, of course, and survive that way with hunting tools, which is terrible. We don't need that today anymore to live. Okay, so we can get rid of the Neanderthal caveman way of living. Let's get rid of it. If you still hunt, you're still a caveman. You know, don't make fun of that Geico caveman if you're hunting. Okay, the Geico caveman is a whole nicer guy than a hunter is. Actually, Geico caveman is made to look more like an intellectual who's a little bit cranky. I love those commercials. Those are the best, by the way. Whoever made those, thumbs up. Excellent. Absolutely. That's absolutely excellent. So, yeah, we don't need this anymore, but that's how we have evolved, and they have evolved to use their noses, their big, huge noses, the big muscles. So, yeah, so they're more evolved that way, and they also have a better sense of hearing, and the whales have an infinitively amazing sense of hearing. They work on hearing. I think most of the cortex is occupied for the hearing function. And yeah, huge part of the cortex is occupied by the hearing function in predatory animals on land as well, of course, like dogs or wolves. Dogs evolved from wolves. All dogs. That's what they have done DNA analysis, and they found that. Okay, then there are some other canine animals that have evolved parallel to the wolf, but all dog species have come from the wolf originally. The wolf has become a friend of humans, and it started because original humans, they still had a lot of hair on their body. They were feeding the wolves, and so the wolves became friends with them. They said, "Thank you for the food. We will help you hunt, and we will help you find that animal we will point the animal out to you." That's where the name pointer comes from. So this is how the friendship came to be, and then out of this friendship grew a symbiotic relationship where one can't be without the other, and it became the biggest love of eternity. I think this is the biggest love relationship that exists between a dog and a human. And then the dogs were made into an art form, and they were like molded by people. There was no more natural selection, then it was evolution through art. Art evolution is what the dogs have evolved into. Now, so they have evolved into that, whatever people made them to look like, into an incredible range of diversity, from a little Chihuahua to a gigantic Great Dane to a bull terrier, pit bull terrier with the most beautiful heads, wide heads, and the Great Dane with the narrow head, and the Greyhound with the real narrow head, and some Asian dogs that are large and like the Saint Bernard with gigantic hair, and the little pixie dogs that are the Pomeranians. I mean, such incredible diversity. You know, in evolution, they would have all become separate species, and it would have taken much longer to evolve into these separate species. These are now all the same species. They can still interbreed, and that's why it is critical that we do not put a sperm from a large dog into a small dog, because that can rip the small dog apart. So don't ever, ever, ever do this. Don't mix small dogs with big dogs. Don't do it. This is terrible. Keep the small dogs together. And I recommend to people not to breed any more dogs. There's so many dogs that are waiting to be adopted in the shelter. So many of them. They need a home, you know. They're being euthanized. And it's absolutely terrible. But it's better to be euthanized after a week or two than suffering a lifetime in a shelter. Can you imagine suffering a lifetime, a life in prison? I think life in prison is worse than death. So if I was in the shoes of a prisoner like this, I would choose death. And I think that Eileen Wuornos, the woman who has murdered several men, I think that the reason why she said in the end that she did this, that she didn't care about them, that she just was calculating, she wanted their money, it was pretty obvious to me that she wanted the death penalty. Okay, that's why she said that, because she didn't want to live for the rest of her life in this horrific situation. And I totally understand. That poor woman, I feel absolutely sorry for her, what she has gone through. She was terribly mentally ill and damaged, and it was best for her. The life she was living was not good for her. It was dangerous for others, and it didn't help anybody. It didn't help her. It didn't help anyone. So it was best for her. It was a relief for her to die. And so, yeah, it is better that way. But we can prevent all of this death and all of that suffering if we don't breed so many dogs. If you're a breeder, you can, if you have an outstanding animal with an incredible character, loving and looks the way you want him to look, but has to be healthy, can't be having too long of a back or too short of a nose. You know, this is very critical. Or too long legs. That's not beneficial for the animal. It can't be a crippled type of animal. I mean, it has to look good, but in the range of being healthy. And don't cut the ears. Don't cut anything from the animal. Okay, and make sure that the animal that you're breeding is healthy and happy and well, and that the body is functioning perfectly well, that they can walk up the stairs without falling over, or that they're sturdy and that their airways are straight and that the back isn't hurting, and all of this. Very, very critical. So Basset Hounds and English Bulldogs are crippled dogs. People have made them crippled. So this is not ethical, again. And they look very cute, but don't do it on cost of the animal suffering, So don't do it on cost of the animals. It's very, very important. So yeah, I don't breed those anymore. Take a Basset Hound and an English Bulldog, breed those together, make a new one out of that. A Bull Basset, you can call it Bull Basset or Basset Bull, whatever you want to call it. Make it a healthy breed, and if you're a breeder, only breed them once or maximally twice, okay? And have several years, have 4 or 5 years in between for the dog to recover. And not more than that. Puppy mills need to be outlawed. They are using these animals as breeding machines. It's like the pigs in the gestation crates. That also needs to be outlawed. This is absolutely horrific. That's like putting a woman in a tiny enclosure where she can't even turn around, and fertilizing her and having her give birth once a year. That's the same, and have her live like this for as long until her body, her system breaks down, shuts down after a few years. That's what they're doing to the animals. Needs to be outlawed, and we need to all help. We need to write letters to get that outlawed. The third big misconception is when people say, and I've heard this, and I was absolutely shocked to hear this, even by people we knew quite well. I was so shocked. There's no way I can stay friends with somebody who says something like this. I don't want to name any names. There's somebody my husband knows who's a hunter, and he said and Paul said to him that he hates hunters, and so this guy of course he took terrible offense, and he said to him that he shoots the motherfuckers. He calls them motherfuckers, actually, or some of them call them beasts too, and that's an ancient word from the Bible, which needs to be outlawed. Need to throw that in the trash can on your desktop. Okay, so no more beasts in referring to animals. You can maybe call yourself the beast, okay, but don't call animals beasts. And this also an appeal to Esther Hicks. Esther Hicks, please do not call animals beasts anymore. We are now 2013. We don't need 300-year-old language anymore. Thank you very much. I would really appreciate it. Other than that, I like what you say. A lot of things you say that are really good and helpful. But don't do speciesism, and don't do corporatism. Don't do corporatism. That makes you too corpulent. Okay? So become trim and slim intellectually and physically. Go vegan and stop the corpulent corporatism. Thank you, Esther. The person said to my husband was that when my husband was criticizing the lead bullets, that we need to at least outlaw lead bullets, because what happens is an animal will be hit by a lead bullet, will not die, and then die a real long, excruciating, painful death, because the lead will leak out into the system and will poison that animal in a really horrific way and cause nerve damage, and the animal will die slowly and horrifically. It's like torture. So that's why we're against lead bullets, because it is cruel. So this is his argument. It's like, I've heard it so many times, people saying, well, the animal shouldn't have eaten that poison bait, or the animal shouldn't have eaten a bullet, or shouldn't have eaten this, or shouldn't have eaten a poisoned rat or something. Like they know better, you know. It's like, this is the typical thing, what people always do. On one hand, and just recently had a discussion about this on Facebook with somebody. On one hand, the person will say, well, the human is way more intelligent, so that makes the human have the right, blah, 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 stuff, shit like this, which is not an ethical argument at all to begin with, because the other animals, even if they're not as intellectually strong, they still want to live, and they still have the right to be protected and be safe and happy and all of this. But it's those people who on one hand accuse the animals of not being intellectually strong enough, but at the same time they will accuse them of they should have known better, you know, they shouldn't have eaten this. you know, you see this, how double standard this is. Like on one side, they accuse them of not being smart enough. On the other side, they accuse them of they should have known better with what they were doing. This isn't working in itself, this type of argumentation. This is incredibly unintelligent argumentation and uncaring argumentation, and it's just based on complete ignorance. So yeah, we need to become aware of this. We need to stop this speciesism for good. We need to get more information. We need to learn. We need to read. People go back to school, you know, learn about biology. Thank you.